The cantina on Nexus Station was dark and filled with smoke from a dozen different worlds. Strange music played softly in the background while aliens from across the galaxy sat at metal tables, drinking and talking in hushed voices. In the far corner, away from the main crowd, sat a figure that made even the toughest smugglers and pirates look away in fear. Commander Zethka had once been the pride of the Valorian Empire. His blue shell had gleamed like polished metal, and his forearms had moved with the grace of a trained warrior. Now deep scars ran across his carapace like lightning bolts frozen in time. His compound eyes, once bright and confident, darted around the room, as if expecting danger from every shadow. His hands shook slightly as he lifted a crystal glass filled with purple liquid to his mouth. The young Valorian sitting across from him could barely contain her excitement. Velinara was fresh from the military academy, her shell still bright and unmarked by battle. She had heard whispers about Commander Zethka in the barracks. The older soldiers spoke his name in quiet voices, always followed by stories that seemed too incredible to believe. Stories about a war that had changed everything. Stories about creatures called humans, Commander Velinar said, leaning forward eagerly. The stories I have heard, ... Are they true? Did you really fight the humans? Zethka's eyes snapped to her face, and she saw something there that made her stomach turn cold. It was not anger or annoyance. It was pure, naked fear. The kind of fear that came from seeing things that should not exist. You should not ask about such things, young one, Zethka said, his voice rough like grinding stone. Some knowledge is too dangerous to share. But Velinara had traveled too far and waited too long to give up now. Please, Commander. The Academy teaches us that the Valorian Empire is the strongest force in the galaxy. They say no species can stand against our might, but the Whispers say different. They say the humans. The humans, Zethka interrupted, and his voice dropped. To barely above a whisper? Yes, I fought the humans. I led 3 battle groups against their small blue world. I commanded over 50,000 of our finest warriors. I had ships that could crack planets in half. He paused and took another drink, his hands shaking more now. And they sent me running home like a scared child. Lenara felt her excitement grow. This was exactly what she had hoped to hear. Real stories from a real veteran. Tell me what happened, Commander. Tell me about the war. Zethka was quiet for a long time. Around them, the cantina continued its normal business. Traders argued over shipping routes. Pirates bragged about their latest raids. Mercenaries compared scars and weapons. But at their table, silence stretched like a held breath. Finally, the old commander spoke. 3 cycles ago, the High Command decided to expand our territory. We had conquered the Threxian Federation without much trouble. The Zelkani Combine surrendered after one battle. We thought we were unstoppable. His eyes grew distant, as if he was seeing something far away. Then our scouts found a small system with a single inhabited world. The inhabitants called themselves humans. Their technology looked primitive compared to ours. Their ships were tiny. Their weapons seemed weak. The High Command laughed when they saw the reports. What did the reports say? Velinara asked. They were perfect for conquest, Zethka replied. A young species, barely out of their home system, had some colonies, but nothing impressive. No great fleets, no terrible weapons, just ... humans. He said the word like it tasted bad in his mouth. I was chosen to lead the first wave. It was supposed to be a simple operation. Show up, demand surrender, take control. The kind of thing we had done 100 times before, with 100 different species. Zethka's voice grew quieter. I remember. The briefing. Admiral Kriksta told us it would be over in a few days. Maybe a week if they were stubborn. We would return home as heroes, with another world added to the Empire. But something went wrong, Velinara said. Everything went wrong, Zethka corrected. From the very first moment we entered their system, nothing happened the way it was supposed to. We expected them to panic. We expected them to surrender. We expected them to beg for mercy. Lifted his glass again, but this time he just stared into the purple liquid without drinking. Instead, they attacked us. But you said their ships. were small, Velenar protested. Their weapons were weak. That is what our intelligence told us, Zethka agreed. And it was true in a way. Their ships were smaller than ours. Their weapons did less damage. But we had missed the most important thing about humans, that they do not fight the way normal species fight. When most creatures face a stronger enemy, they either surrender or they die quickly. Humans do something else entirely. Zethka finally took another drink, and when he continued, his voice was barely audible. They turn into monsters. The word hung in the air between them like a curse. Around them, the normal sounds of the cantina seemed to fade away. Velenara found herself holding her breath. I do not mean they look like monsters, Zethka continued. I mean they become something that should not exist in any sane universe. They become creatures that refuse to accept reality. Creatures that look at impossible odds and laugh. Creatures that turn their own deaths into weapons. He set down his glass and looked directly at Velenara. You know what the first human said to me when I demanded their surrender? She shook her head. His name was Captain Jake Morrison. His ship was called the UES Defiance, was surrounded by my entire battle group. 50 of our greatest warships against his one small vessel. He should have been terrified, should have begged for his life. Zethka's mandibles clicked together. Nervously, instead, he opened a communication channel to every ship in my fleet. And do you know what he said? What? Velenara whispered. He said, come and take it. The simple words seemed to echo in the quiet space around their table. Velenara felt a chill run down her spine, though she was not sure why. Those 4 words, Zethka continued, changed everything. They were not a surrender. They were not a plea for mercy. They were a challenge, a declaration of war, promise that whatever we wanted from them, we would have to pay for it in blood. He stood up slowly, his scarred body moving like an old machine. And that young Velenara was when I learned that some species are not meant to be conquered. Some species are meant to be feared. As he walked away, leaving her alone at the table, Velenara heard him whisper one last thing.
Us.
The humans taught me that the universe is full of predators. But they also taught me that there is always a bigger predator. Velenara could not sleep that night. She kept thinking about Commander Zethka's words and the fear in his eyes. The next evening, she returned to the same cantina, hoping to find him again. She needed to hear more of the story. The old commander was there, sitting in the same corner table. He looked even more tired than before, as if remembering the humans had drained something from him. When he saw her approaching, he did not seem surprised. You came back, he said simply. I have to. Know what happened next? Velenara said, sitting down across from him. After Captain Morrison said those words, Zethka stared at his drink for a long moment. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about war. Began to speak, and his voice carried her back to that terrible day 3 cycles ago. Battle had started exactly as Admiral Krixta had planned. The Valorian fleet surrounded the human ship called the UES Defiance. It was a small vessel, maybe 1/10 the size of a Valorian cruiser. Its weapons were primitive energy cannons that could barely scratch their armor. Its shields were weak and flickered like a dying flame. We should have destroyed them in minutes, Zethka said. Our weapons were stronger. Shields were better. We had 50 ships to their 1. Should have been simple. But Captain Jake Morrison did not fight like a normal being. Instead of trying to run or hide, he flew his ship straight at the largest Valorian dreadnought. His weapons fired constantly, even though they did almost no damage. His ship twisted and turned in ways that seemed impossible, dodging the heavy fire from the alien fleet. He was buying time, Zethka realized now. While we focused on his ship, more human vessels were coming. Small fighters, cargo ships, even civilian transports. They came from everywhere, like insects swarming out of a nest. The human reinforcements were just as small and weak as the first ship, but they fought with the same insane courage. Flew their ships like weapons, ramming into Valorian vessels when their guns failed. They used their own ships as bombs, crashing into the alien hulls and exploding. Zethka's hands shook as he remembered. Lieutenant Sarah Walsh was flying a damaged fighter. Her weapons were gone. Her shields were down. Half her ship was on fire. Any sane pilot would have ejected. What did she do? Velenar asked. She flew straight into the bridge of our command ship. She used her fighter like a missile, punching through the armor and killing Admiral Krixta and his entire staff. One small human in a broken ship took out our entire command structure. But the space battle was only the beginning. Had ground forces too, and they were even more terrifying than their pilots. When Valorian troops landed on the human colony world of New Terra, they expected to face a normal army. Soldiers in uniforms, fighting from prepared positions, following normal military tactics. Instead, they found something else entirely. The first thing that went wrong was the landing, Zethka continued. We sent down troop transports to secure the spaceport. It looked empty. No defenders, no weapons, just empty buildings and silent landing pads. The Valorian soldiers had barely stepped off their ships when the explosion started. The humans had hidden bombs everywhere, the walls, under the floors. Even in the air vents, spaceport became a death trap in seconds. Sergeant Danny Cruz was the first human ground soldier I saw, Zethka said, and his voice dropped to a whisper. He appeared from nowhere, like a ghost. His uniform was torn and bloody. He was carrying a weapon that looked like a metal stick with a trigger. The human sergeant had been hiding in a drainage pipe for hours, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When the Valorian troops regrouped after the explosions, he attacked from behind. His primitive rifle fired small metal bullets that somehow punched through Valorian armor like it was paper. He killed 6 of my soldiers before we even knew he was there, Zethka remembered. Then we shot him. He should have died. He should have run, should have surrendered. But he did not, Velenara guessed. He picked up his rifle with his remaining arm and kept fighting. He used it like a club when his ammunition ran out. Even when we finally brought him down, he was still trying to crawl toward us, still trying to fight. The human ground forces did not fight like any army the Valorians had ever faced. They did not wear matching uniforms or carry the same weapons. Some were soldiers, but others were farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, even children. They all fought with the same desperate courage. They used tactics that made no sense to the Valorian military mind. They would attack, then disappear. They would pretend to retreat, then ambush their pursuers. They turned every building into a fortress and every street into a battlefield. Captain Lisa Grant was their leader, Zethka said. She was a small human female, maybe half my size. She commanded the defense of the main city. We had 10,000 troops. She had maybe a few hundred. The Valorian forces surrounded the city and demanded surrender. Captain Grant's response was broadcast on every communication channel in the system. Her voice was calm and steady, without any trace of fear. She said, "We hold this ground. We do not yield. We do not surrender. We fight until the last human falls, and then we fight some more." The siege lasted for 3 weeks. The Valorians had better weapons, better armor, and overwhelming numbers. But the humans knew every street, every building, every hiding place. They used the sewers to move around unseen. They turned everyday objects into weapons. They made the city itself fight against its invaders. Every door could hide a bomb, Zethka said. Every window could hide a sniper. Every innocent-looking human could be carrying a weapon. They turned their own children into soldiers. The worst part was how the humans treated their own dead. Instead of mourning their losses, they used them as inspiration. When Captain Grant finally fell, defending the city's main plaza, her last words were recorded and broadcast to every human in the system. She said, "Remember us. Remember why we fight. Remember that freedom is worth dying for." Her death did not break human morale. Instead, it made them fight harder. Every fallen human became a martyr. Every defeat became a rallying cry. The Valorians began to realize they were not just fighting an army. They were fighting an idea. The humans had a saying, Zethka said, finishing his drink. They said, "You can kill a man, but you cannot kill an idea." I did not understand what they meant. At first, he stood up slowly, his scarred body creaking like old metal. But I understand now. We were not fighting humans. We were fighting the idea that some things are worth dying for, and that idea is harder to kill than any army. As he walked away, Velinara sat alone in the dim cantina, trying to process what she had heard. The humans sounded like monsters, but they also sounded like heroes. She wondered which one was true, and whether there was any difference. 3 days passed before Velinara saw Commander Zethka again. This time, she found him in a different part of the station, standing alone on an observation deck, staring out at the stars. His reflection in the transparent metal looked like a ghost. "Commander," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. He turned slowly, and she saw that his eyes had gotten worse. They darted around constantly now, as if he expected attack from any direction. "You keep coming back," he said.
Ow.
Young soldiers would have heard enough by now. "I need to understand," Velinara replied. "The Academy never taught us about enemies like this. How do we fight something that refuses to be defeated?" Zethka made a sound that might have been laughter, but it held no humor. "That is exactly what the High Command asked me after the first battles. They could not understand how we were losing to such a primitive species." He moved to a metal bench and sat down heavily. "So they sent reinforcements. More ships, more soldiers. Better weapons. They thought the problem was that we did not have enough force." "But that was not the problem?" Velinara asked, joining him on the bench. "The problem was that we still did not understand what we were fighting," Zethka said. "We thought conquering their worlds would end the war. We thought controlling their cities would make them surrender. We had no idea that for humans, losing a battle is just the beginning of the real fight." He began to tell her about the occupation of New Texas, one of the larger human colony worlds. The Valorian fleet had bombarded the planet from orbit, destroying military bases and government buildings. Their ground forces had landed and taken control of all the major cities within a week. By every normal measure, the planet was conquered. "General Marcus Stone was the human military commander," Zethka said. "We captured him during the first week of fighting. He was wounded and his army was scattered. We thought the resistance was broken. But General Stone had planned for defeat. Before his capture, he had given orders to every human on the planet. Not just soldiers, but civilians too. Men, women, children, elderly people. Everyone became part of the resistance. The first sign of trouble came 3 days after we declared victory," Zethka remembered. "A supply convoy was traveling between 2 cities. 50 vehicles heavily guarded. It should have been a routine trip. Convoy never arrived. When search teams found it, every vehicle was destroyed. Valorian soldiers were dead, and their weapons were gone. There were no signs of a large battle. It looked like the convoy had simply vanished into thin air. We found tracks leading away from the road," Zethka continued. "Small footprints. Some of them looked like they came from children. The resistance grew stronger every day. Human children, some as young as 10 years old, were planting bombs along patrol routes. Elderly humans were gathering information about Valorian troop movements and passing it to the fighters. Even the wounded humans in hospitals were helping, hiding weapons and supplies. Commander Rick Palmer was their leader after Stone was captured," Zethka said. "He was a teacher before the war, taught young humans about history and mathematics. But he learned to fight like a demon." Palmer had organized the humans into small groups that struck without warning and disappeared like smoke. They never fought fair battles. Instead, they attacked supply lines, communication centers, and isolated patrols. They made it impossible for the Valorians to feel safe anywhere on the planet. "The worst part was that we could never tell who was dangerous," Zethka said, his voice growing quieter. "A human shopkeeper would sell us food during the day then, plant bombs in our barracks at night. A human child would ask for candy, then lead us into an ambush. We began to fear every human we saw. The Valorians tried to fight back with traditional methods. They imposed curfews and searched houses for weapons. They arrested suspected resistance members and interrogated them. They even took hostages, threatening to kill innocent humans if the attacks continued. None of it worked. The humans had a saying that Palmer taught them. The tree of liberty must be watered with blood. They seemed to believe that freedom was worth any sacrifice, even the lives of their own people. When we executed hostages, more humans joined the resistance," Zethka said. "When we destroyed their homes, they fought from the ruins. When we killed their leaders, new ones took their place. It was like fighting the ocean itself. The turning point came when the Valorians captured Palmer himself. They had tracked him for months, using their best intelligence officers and most advanced technology. When they finally cornered him in an abandoned factory, he was alone and wounded. "We thought capturing him would break their spirit," Zethka said. "Palmer was their inspiration, their symbol of hope. Without him, we believed the resistance would collapse." But Palmer's capture had the opposite effect. During his trial, he was allowed to speak. His words were broadcast across the planet, and somehow they reached other human worlds too. He looked directly at the camera and said, "You can imprison my body, but you cannot imprison the idea of freedom. Every human who hears these words will know that our cause is just. You may kill me, but you cannot kill what I represent." The Valorians executed Palmer the next day, hoping to end his influence. Instead, his death created a legend. Humans across the galaxy began calling him a martyr. His final words became a battle cry that spread from world to world. After Palmer died, the resistance changed, Zethka said. It became more coordinated, more dangerous. Other human worlds began sending help. Weapons, supplies, even volunteers who came to fight alongside the rebels. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Brooks arrived from Earth with a team of specialists who taught the local humans new tactics. They called it ghost warfare, appearing from nowhere, striking hard, and vanishing before the enemy could respond. The Valorians began to call her the Phantom because she seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Brooks taught them to use our own strength against us, Zethka explained. Our heavy armor made us slow, so they used speed. Our advanced sensors could not track them in the underground tunnels, so they lived like cave dwellers. Our superior firepower was useless when we could not find targets to shoot at. The war on New Texas lasted for 18 months. The Valorians controlled the cities during the day, but the humans owned the night. Supply lines were constantly under attack. Communication networks were sabotaged daily. Valorian soldiers began to suffer from what their medics called battle fatigue. They were afraid to leave their bases. In the end, we won the planet, but lost the war, Zethka said. We had control of the major cities, but the humans controlled everything else. We had to use most of our fleet just to keep one world pacified, and every day, more humans joined the fight. He stood up from the bench and walked back to the window. The High Command finally realized that occupying human worlds was impossible. Every victory created 10 new problems. Every dead human created 10 new enemies. "So what did you do?" Velinara asked. "We tried to end it quickly," Zethka replied. "We decided to attack their home world directly. Earth, we thought, if we could conquer the heart of their empire, the rest would surrender." He turned to look at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. That decision almost destroyed us all. Velinara found Commander Zethka in the cantina's back room, sitting alone in complete darkness. She had been looking for him for 2 days, and when she finally found him, he looked worse than ever. His hands shook constantly now, and he jumped at every sound. "Commander," she said gently, turning on a small light, "you said you were going to tell me about Earth." Zethka looked up at her with eyes that seemed to have seen the end of the universe. "Earth," he whispered. "The final battle. The day one. Learn that some species should never be challenged." He was quiet for so long that Velinara thought he might not continue. Finally, he began to speak, his voice barely audible in the small room. The Valorian High Command had assembled the largest fleet in their history for the attack on Earth. Over 200 warships, including their most powerful dreadnoughts and battle cruisers. The plan was simple. Destroy the human home world so completely that no other human colony would dare to resist. "I commanded the advance force," Zethka said. 50 ships, the best crews in the Empire. We were supposed to clear the way for the main fleet. Intelligence told us that Earth's defenses were weak. A few orbital stations, some patrol ships, nothing that could threaten a force like ours. But as the Valorian fleet approached the Sol system, they discovered that intelligence had been wrong. Earth was not defensively weak. It was defended by something far more dangerous than weapons or shields. Admiral Kevin Nash commanded the human defense fleet, Zethka continued. He had maybe 30 ships, old cruisers, converted cargo vessels, even civilian ships with weapons bolted onto their hulls. By every measure, we should have destroyed them in minutes. The Battle of Titan began when Nash's fleet took position near Saturn's rings. The humans used the ice and rock as cover, hiding among the debris like pirates. It was not a strategy that any trained military officer would use. Nash opened communications with our fleet, Zethka remembered. He said, "Welcome to our solar system. You picked the wrong species to threaten." Then, he did something that still gives me nightmares. Instead of attacking with his whole fleet at once, Nash divided his ships into small groups. Each group attacked a different part of the Valorian formation, then retreated back into the rings. It was like being stung by a swarm of insects. Tried to follow them into the debris field, Zethka said. That was our first mistake. The humans knew every piece of rock and ice in those rings. They led us into ambushes, used asteroids as weapons, turned Saturn itself into a battlefield. The human ships fought with the same insane courage that Zethka had seen before. When their weapons failed, they rammed Valorian vessels. When their engines were damaged, they used their ships as bombs. One human captain, a woman named Julie Harper, flew her crippled destroyer straight into the center of the Valorian formation. Commander Harper broadcast a message to every ship in both fleets, Zethka said, his voice cracking. She said, "For Earth, for humanity, for everyone who calls this universe home, remember that some things are worth dying for." Harper's ship exploded in the middle of the Valorian fleet, creating a chain reaction that destroyed 5 dreadnoughts and damaged dozens of others. But worse than the physical damage was what her sacrifice did to human morale. After Harper died, the human fleet changed, Zethka said. They stopped fighting like soldiers and started fighting like forces of nature. Every ship became a weapon. Every pilot became a martyr waiting to happen. The battle raged for 3 days. The Valorians had superior numbers and better technology, but the humans had something else. They had the absolute certainty that they were fighting for something bigger than themselves. On the second day, reinforcements arrived. Zethka continued, "Not for us, for them." Human ships came from every colony, every outpost, every settlement in their space. Cargo haulers, mining ships, even pleasure craft. All of them armed with whatever weapons they could find. The human reinforcements did not arrive in formation or follow standard tactics. They came in waves, each ship flying alone or in small groups. They attacked without coordination, without strategy, without any regard for their own safety. Was chaos, Zethka said. Beautiful, terrible chaos. We were fighting an entire species that had decided to throw everything they had at us. Men, women, children, elderly pilots who should have been retired years ago. All of them willing to die to protect their home. But it was not the space battle that broke the Valorian will to fight. It was what happened when some of their ships tried to reach Earth's surface. Captain Bill Rodriguez commanded a human ground defense unit, Zethka said. When our dropships landed near their capital city, he was waiting with a message that we broadcast to every Valorian ship in the system. Rodriguez's message was simple, but devastating. He explained that the humans had prepared for this moment. Every city on Earth was ready to fight. Every civilian was armed. Every building was rigged to explode rather than be captured. He said that if we wanted to conquer Earth, we were welcome to try, Zethka remembered. But he promised that we would have to kill every human on the planet to do it. Men, women, children, everyone. He said they would rather die free than live as slaves. The Valorian fleet faced a choice. They could continue the attack and probably win, but it would require the complete destruction of Earth and everyone on it. Billions of deaths just to claim one planet. That was when we realized the truth about humans, Zethka said. We're not just fighting for territory or resources, or even survival. They were fighting for an idea. The idea that intelligent beings should be free to choose their own destiny. The final blow came when Admiral Nash sent one last message to the Valorian fleet. He explained that the human colonies had already decided what to do if Earth fell. They would continue fighting, world by world, system by system, until either humanity was extinct or the Valorians gave up. He said, "You can kill us, but you cannot defeat us. Because we are not just fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for every species in the galaxy that wants to be free, and that idea will outlive all of us." The Valorian High Command recalled. Their fleet the next day, they'd won most of the battles, but they had lost the war. The cost of conquering humanity would be too high, and even if they succeeded, they would face rebellion for generations. "We signed a peace treaty a month later," Zethka said. "Not because we were defeated, but because we finally understood what we were fighting. You cannot conquer an idea with weapons. You cannot defeat a species that values freedom more than life itself." He stood up slowly and walked toward the door. "The humans taught us the most important lesson in the galaxy. Some species are not meant to be conquered. They are meant to be respected, feared, and if you are very lucky, befriended." He reached the door. He turned back to Velinara one last time. "Never forget this story, young one. Share it with others. Because the universe needs to know that there are species out there who will fight for freedom no matter the cost. And those species will change everything." The old commander disappeared into the corridors of the station, leaving Velinara alone. With her thoughts, she understood now why the older soldiers spoke of humans in whispers. They were not just another species to be conquered or avoided. They were a reminder that in a galaxy full of empires and tyrants, some beings still believed that freedom was worth dying for, and that belief, she realized, was the most dangerous weapon of all.